So, listening to that Colin Kaepernick thing, what I was thinking is catchphrases make us stupid. You use these catchphrases, like mass incarceration and, the prison industrial complex, and they sound important, but they actually make us dumb. Back in the 80s, we had a crack epidemic in this country, and people were slaughtering each other in the streets. You could not walk outside in New York without risking getting your head blown off. They came up with this scientific way of policing neighborhoods called CompStat. They used it brilliantly. It resulted in a lot of arrests of a lot of bad guys, this zero tolerance policy where you say we're going to get rid of the minor crimes because minor crimes create neighborhoods in which major crimes take place. And a lot of people got incarcerated, and the murder rate dropped 48%. Now, that is a lot of lives that got saved since the 80s, which is now almost 40 years ago, right? So that's when you have a murder rate dropping by half, essentially over 40 years, you're going to save a lot of black lives. So if you said to me, that was great, we solved that problem, but imprisoning people is a blunt instrument. It takes men away from their families. It takes men out of the neighborhood. Maybe we can find some other ways of doing this. Then we would have a discussion going on. But when you talk about mass incarceration, which sounds like the police just swept down and arrested people because of the color of their skin, which is absolute baloney. It's not a little baloney. It's absolute baloney. You can have those words come out and you sound important and you sound impressive, especially when they're giving you some idiotic award for doing something you shouldn't have done in the first place. But you're being stupid and you're making yourself stupid and you're selling stupidity. The same thing goes for transgender people. If you said to me, masculine and feminine traits are distributed in such a way that men have more masculine traits and women have more feminine traits. But every now and again, you get somebody who's on the other side of that spectrum and it's uncomfortable and it's unpleasant and they get bullied and it's unhappy. Maybe there's something we can do about that. I think that's a conversation that anybody would be willing to have, any person of goodwill would be willing to have. But when you come along and you say, well, some women have penises, then the first thing you think is, no, absolutely no, zero number of women have penises. That is the definition of not being a woman. And so, you can't have a conversation. If you say to me, some Chicago pol who happened to get himself installed in the White House can tell me in, Nashville who goes into the men's bathroom in my elementary school, then I say, no, I'm not going to have that conversation with you. It's the way language makes you stupid. So I was watching, this weekend, the president had a really good weekend. And I was watching the thing as information starts coming out about what really happened during this Russian collusion investigation. I started to think, the deep state is another one of these catchphrases that can make you stupid, because you think of the deep state, you think of Alex Jones with his crazy conspiracy theories, you think of like Pizzagate, this nonsense that people come up with. And I always think of when I hear deep state is there's always a scene in every spy movie where two guys in ties meet on a bench on the Washington Mall. I don't even know if there are benches in the Washington Mall, but they install them just for these conversations, and they kind of talk in coded language, and the next scene, somebody's trying to commit an assassination. Our government is committing assassinations. And so that's not the deep state. The deep state is people. The deep state is people with positions of power who misuse that power, or who use it in such a way, who become so puffed up with themselves that they start to think that their decisions about who should be in office should trump, as it were, the will of the people. And I think that is something that happened. When I look at the people who are most attacking Donald Trump for his personality, and we've talked about his personality here a million times, I won't go into it again, but the people who are really saying things like he's morally unfit to be president, or this guy it's a kakistocracy, a government of evil. Guys like former CIA Director James Brennan and former National Intelligence Director James Clapper and James Comey of the FBI. And you notice they're all named James. I think that's a tell to a conspiracy right there. All those guys were the ones who were most deeply involved in creating this impression that the Russians somehow had something to do with the outcome of the election, which really turns out not to have been true. I mean, if you put all the people who have been indicted for this together, I don't think you're talking about a single vote that got changed. Now, let's just flash back for a moment to Hillary Clinton. Remember when Trump said he wasn't sure, he would wait and see whether he would accept the results of the of the election. And remember the horror, the absolute horror that went through the mainstream media about, oh my God, he is undermining our very trust in our, electoral system. And remember Hillary Clinton, Lester Holt asked the question of Hillary Clinton, and here was her pompous, self-righteous reply.
Are you willing to accept the outcome as the will of the voters? Secretary Clinton?
Well, I support our democracy. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But I certainly will support the outcome of this election. And I know Donald's trying very hard to plant doubts about it, but I hope the people out there understand this election's really up to you. It's not about us so much as it is about you and your families and the kind of country and future you want. So I sure hope you will get out and vote as though your future depended on it, because I think it does.
So now, of course, forget we canceled that. We're going to cancel the trust in our electoral system and completely make up this thing, which now really does seem like it was guys like Clapper and Brennan and Comey covering up the fact that they did stuff they shouldn't have done during the election and after the election when they were trying to delegitimize Trump. Devin Nunes, who knows what the hell the guy's name is, but the guy who was on the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, we'll just call him from now. He came out and he said this. He said, we've now seen how this thing got started, and there was nothing that got it started. In other words, it was just sort of started out of thin air. This is cut number 2.
Now, this is really important to us because a counterintelligence investigation uses the tools of our intelligence services that are not supposed to be used on American citizens. We've long wanted to know, well, what intelligence did you have that actually led to this investigation? What we found now, after the investigators have reviewed it, is that, in fact, there was no intelligence.
Now, to hear that there's no intelligence in our government is not going to strike anybody as a surprise, but there was no intelligence to launch an investigation into an American presidential campaign. So, right, they were essentially tapping the Trump campaign with no intelligence to back them up. That's what Devin Nunes is saying here, and that's an amazing thing. So who knows about that? Well, one guy who knows about it is Andrew McCabe, and Andrew McCabe, the Inspector General, has just referred Andrew McCabe to possible criminal prosecution for his dishonesty about the leaks that he gave to the Wall Street Journal. So you start to think, well, is McCabe going to start to talk about this? This is something that could really be happening. And then finally, after a year of trying to get these memos, the James Comey memos. Remember, James Comey, he never did this with Barack Obama, but when Trump took office, he started to take notes about his meetings with Trump, some of which he then leaked in order to spur this special counsel investigation. So that, again, is a movement by a law officer to spark a special counsel investigation by leaking what might have been classified information, certainly before Congress could get to look at these memos. But now the memos say, and some of this is coming from Molly Hemingway, who is indeed a Trump partisan, but she's also incredibly smart and incisive and sees these things in a very clear way, and also sees Trump in a very clear way, even though she supports him. She's writing over, obviously, at The Federalist. But she points out that in these memos of these records of these meetings that Comey had, it was the former director of national intelligence, James Clapper, who is now a CNN national security analyst, right, and a very big anti-Trumper. Clapper sent Comey in, according to these memos, Clapper sent Comey in to brief Trump on this Steele dossier about the urinating Russian prostitutes, which I think should be a rock band, right? Urinating Russian prostitutes. It sounds like something. Never mind. I'm sorry. That just my mind strayed there for a minute. But all right. So he goes in and he briefs Trump on this, and he says, CNN is looking for a news hook. They have this, and they're looking for a news hook to put this out there, right? And then suddenly, like the next day, this is a small meeting, CNN has the news hook. What's the news hook? The news hook is that Comey briefed Trump on the dossier at Clapper's insistence, and Clapper now is a CNN testament. You know, one of the things that the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes' committee, found out was that this is from their records, is the former director of national intelligence, James Clapper, now a CNN national security analyst, provided inconsistent testimony to the committee about his contacts with the media, including CNN. So what Molly is saying is this was a setup, that Clapper sent, maybe Comey didn't know it was happening, but Clapper sent Comey in there to give his pals at CNN a reason to report this story, which is what people have been saying. So now, I mean, this stuff is all unraveling. It's pretty obvious. It's pretty obvious that Donald Trump was not on the phone, it seems to me. I mean, look, you can always find out new information. Robert Mueller may come up with new information. But as of this moment, the idea that Donald Trump was on the phone to Putin, you know, and Putin is saying, I will get you elected, and this mattered to anybody, that we cared that they were taking out $100,000 worth of ads on Facebook, you know, that really, you know, skewed the election one way or the other. I mean, what skewed the election was Hillary Clinton was a dishonest, awful candidate, and she didn't go and campaign in the places where the deplorables were, because she deplored them. That's what cost her the election. So now, to keep this narrative alive as it's slipping away, the DNC is now suing, right? It is suing, here they're suing the Trump campaign, Russia, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, and others, alleging a wide-reaching conspiracy intended to interfere with the 2016 presidential campaign. And Trump tweeted out, he said, this is funny, the Democrats have sued the Republicans for winning, which is essentially right. They're suing, saying this whole campaign was a fraud. They never would have lost if it hadn't been for all these people together. Here is Tom Perez of the DNC telling why they filed this suit.
Number one, in order to file a civil suit, you got to make sure you're filing it within the applicable statute of limitations. I don't know when Director Mueller's investigation is going to end, so we need to file now to protect our rights. Number two, we've done our job. We've done our homework. Over the course of the last year, we have seen story after story, brick after brick in the conspiracy between the Russians and the Trump campaign to affect the outcome of the election. I did my homework. We have a strong case. That's why we brought it.
Are you
number
concerned
three,
at all?
George, we have to deter misconduct. We've got elections coming up in November. It's hard to win elections when you have interference in elections, and they've done it with impunity, and I'm concerned that it's going to happen again. So that's why we did it now.
Yeah, I'm buying that. Nah, I'm not buying it. I have to say, if you just compare these two quotes and see which one is more believable, I'm going with the quote from Devin Nunes or Nunes or Nunez. What is the man? How the hell do you pronounce? Devin Nunes had this response.
My first thought is that it's this some kind of joke. This must be a joke. I mean, we know who colluded with Russians. They don't want to admit that they colluded with Russians, but they hired they hired a law firm that hired Fusion GPS, that hired a British spy that went and colluded with Russians. So I don't understand why they just didn't open up a lawsuit against themselves. They should name themselves and sue themselves so that they can get to the bottom of what do they have on their servers. Why didn't they give those servers to the FBI? This is nothing more, nothing less than a continuation of fundraising off of this scandal. This is made to play to the far left in this country so that the far left will continue to write checks because they don't believe that President Trump won the election fair and square. Yeah. Because the media, most of the media in this country has continued this narrative that there was collusion, there was obstruction, that Trump was somehow involved with Putin and Putin helped to steal this election. We've now looked at all this. None of that is true, but the Democrats need a way to keep their base motivated to turn out in November, and they need a way to continue to raise money. And they're raising millions and millions and millions of dollars to target Republicans over this Russia fiasco.
You know, when I say the deep state is people, what I mean is it doesn't mean that, you know, that Clapper and Comey met on a bench in the mall and said, you know, what we're going to do, we're going to send you in and we're going to get this dossier out to this and I'll leak it to CNN. It just means that people start to think that they're more important than the system. They start to think that their morality rises above the Constitution. They start to think that their vision of where the country should go is more important than the people's vision. They start to look at voting as an inconvenience. They start to look at you as a deplorable deplorable inconvenience. That's all that means. That's all it means. And the press and Nunez or Nanaz or Nunu is right about this, that the press is complicit because the press is part of the status quo. The press is always going to be essentially in favor of the left-wing status quo. They think that is the way things should be, and that if the government, if you got 8 years of Obama in power, they do not want to see that change, and they were so sure it wasn't going to change. And they're now discussing, what do we do? What do we do? You know, the New York Times has a piece by the Fusion people, the guys who did the Steele dossier, right? Glenn Simpson and Peter Fritsch, and they have a piece saying, okay, put aside Russian collusion for a moment. Press pause on possible presidential obstruction of justice. Forget Stormy Daniels. The most significant recent development involving the president may be that the special counsel Robert Mueller has subpoenaed Trump Organization business record. So it's like by whatever means necessary, we are going to get that guy. All right, we tried Stormy Daniels, we tried Russian collusion, we tried obstruction of justice. It's all fallen apart. But now we've raided Michael Cohen, and we're going to get at his business records, and we're going to get the sort of thing that somewhere along the line there must be some kind of thing that we can get him on. That is the deep state. That is the deep state at work. When you have an elected president and they're going through every single thing he ever did, trying to find something that they can undermine him with. That is a deep state, essentially. And you know, the press themselves, as you watch them, they're starting to discuss, because Trump really did have a good weekend. I mean, the North Koreans said we're going to stop testing nuclear weapons and we're going to close one of our nuclear sites. Now, look, do I think that is some great concession, or are they, basically trying to draw Trump into something as they did with Clinton? Who knows? I mean, it's not like we're going to suddenly start to trust Kim Jong-un, but it was good news for Trump, and it made him look good. And they, Chuck Todd was saying, like, well, he's given them too much. What did he give him? Well, you agreed to meet him. That's not really giving him that much. It's like, so it's like they're feeling bad. But listen, I want you to listen to the press now discussing what they did wrong, how they could have covered the elections so that Hillary would have won. Was it their fault? Not whether they should hire some Republicans, not whether they should hire some have some Trump supporters on their editorial desks, but how can we be more biased so that this doesn't happen again? They had this woman, Amy Chozick from the New York Times, has got a book coming out. It's called Chasing Hillary. And first of all, it talks about the fact that all of the males in Hillary Clinton's entourage were grabbing the women and saying these sexist things. And nobody said a word about that. Nobody said Hillary Clinton's, campaign is rife with people grabbing women's crotches, because you can get away with it when you work for Hillary. The women will let you do that, when you work for Hillary. They'll let you grab them. But she never told this. But now she talks about the fact that how hard she tried to get a sympathetic piece about Hillary Clinton into the New York Times, and she got wrong-footed by Comey announcing that he was reopening the investigation. And listen to the kind of blindness with which she talks about this.
It was very difficult during that campaign to get any other stories to break through. And in fairness, we covered all of her policies. I tried to write very kind of sympathetic biographical features. The perfect example is I wrote this sympathetic biographical feature about her moving to Arkansas and this feminist mentor of hers trying to talk her out of it. I spent a year on the story. The campaign didn't want it. It was a great story for her. It posted 3 hours before Comey sent his letter to Congress. It didn't even make the paper. It was just impossible to get anything to break through.
Right, but the question there is, are you writing to make something break through, or are you writing what you think the news is? And that is a question that I think we all have to ask going into the next. And I think that's
Amy Chozick's face goes blank, and the woman asking that, I think her name is Stephanie Cutter. She's a Democrat operative, but she was just saying, why are you writing stories to break through? Why aren't you just covering the news? And Chozick, it looks like the question came out of left field, and then George Stephanopoulos essentially says, We made everybody look the same. Now, remember, this is a Hillary Clinton operative. This is a Clinton campaigner. Everybody's picking on Sean Hannity because he talked to Michael Cohen about real estate from time to time. But this is a Clintonista reporting the news. And what he says is, this whole thing about being fair, we got to stop that stuff. It allowed Trump to get elected. Listen to this.
You look back and say, listen, there were things done wrong with emails. There's no question about that. But there's something structurally in the media where we have to equalize everything. If you point out a wrongdoing on one side, you have to point out a wrongdoing on the other, and they automatically become equivalent, and that isn't always fair.
Well, and I think the problem, though, might have been not enough equalization. I don't think it's a problem of how much we covered or how much the press covered the emails. How much investigative work was there done on Donald Trump, particularly during the primary?
Not enough.
He was portrayed more as a phenomenon, the excitement, the attacks, the latest, outrageous thing he said or whatever. There wasn't much investigative reporting going, frankly, until it was too late.
It was too late. This is the self-delusion. I mean, everybody, look, we're all biased, we're all self-deluded, but this is incredible self-delusion. The idea that they think that they were nicer to Hillary Clinton than they were to Trump. And yeah, Trump was a story. Trump had a way of playing the press and getting lots of free press. As he himself would say constantly, he made their ratings go up. But the idea that they were somehow nicer to Donald Trump than they were to Hillary Clinton, that the idea that they shouldn't have covered the news about Hillary Clinton. I mean, let's put it this way. when they interviewed Hillary Clinton's a lawyer working with Hillary Clinton, they asked her when she would like to drop by. They asked her, how, would you like to drop by? Would you like to declare that you're Hillary Clinton's lawyer so that you can't violate principle? They didn't raid her house at 3 a.m. like they did with Michael Cohen. And so, the idea that somehow, when I say the deep state is people, what I just mean is it's this kind of delusion. It's this kind of self-ignorance. It's this kind of bias that leads to what has really been over a year of a fake story that has helped, as Devin Nunes says, it has helped the Democrats with their base, and the press has helped them out. And that's the deep state. The deep state is just people who are ignorant and who do not see themselves putting themselves above the process, doing exactly what Hillary Clinton said was a horrific thing to do, to basically not accept the electoral process as it played out.